Good afternoon in the UK and good evening in Australia. And I'd like to start by welcoming Sue Broadway and Debra Batton, colleagues, collaborators and rivals, the co-creators and makers of Bring One and the Other to La Mama, which was part of the Victorian Seniors Festival. And it was described as a joyous journey of aging disgracefully. I can't wait to hear all about that, so more in a moment. Bravo. I'm Dr. Maggie Irving. I'm a clown, I'm a teacher, and I'm a researcher, especially of female clowning. But first of all, I've just mentioned, but I'm going to mention again, start by a call out to all you watchers and future watchers of these series, brought together by Clown Power, and it couldn't be done, folks, without the donations and the patronage. And thank you from Clown Power to those people who are giving, and you know who you are. Check out www.zoological for more information and for those names. Subscribe to the series. Look at the YouTube channels. Just spread the word by social media, by word of mouth. This is a unique opportunity to listen to people from the clown community talking about clowning, collaboration, and everything else. So thank you. The donation and the subscribing link is patreon.com/zoological. Patreon, Patreon. All credits and video links from this past and future talks will be on the www.zoological website. So welcome everybody. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. If you do have any questions, please put any questions in the box and we'll come to them at some point. So welcome Sue Broadway and Debra Batton. You know, you've had a quite extraordinary life, packed with collaborations. So over to you. Where did it all begin?
Oh, well, we've had different and separate lives, and really fantastic ones, working in the field of circus, gymnastics, dance, theatre, improvisation, all kinds of things. And we've finally come together, well, we've come together in the last few years as a duet as well, to explore the notion of the female clown duo, and that's been quite interesting. Over to you, Deb.
Debra, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Just press the mute button. Great.
Yep, I'm unmuted.
But you met together in circus. Where did you actually meet then?
We met in 1993.
Wow.
And Sue was appointed the first artistic director of Circus Oz, which up until that time had mostly been collective based, but occasionally with sort of people playing the role of some kind of outside eye or guest director. And then, Sue came in as the artistic director, and she, much to my good luck, gave me a job.
I agreed to see you, Debra, because Debra was too early for the auditions. I'd just arrived in Australia from 10 years in England, about a week beforehand, and Debra showed up and said, "You have to see me because I'm funny and I'm really good."
That's a great starting point.
That was really good. And so
I'm only in town for a few days.
And yes, she was going back to Adelaide to do another job or something in Adelaide. I thought, well, I just have to see her then. And I did. I managed to scrape enough people together to do an audition for her. And she was fantastic. It was really great. And it went on from there in various ways, not always great, but always exciting. And we worked together as a director and a performer for 3 years at Circus Oz, and then we didn't see each other for 10 years after that. Deb went off to Sydney to work with Legs on the Wall, and I stayed in Melbourne and went down to Adelaide to work with a different show with Philip Jonty, actually, initially, but with other people. And then 10 years later, we came back together again and started just dancing around each other to see if we might like to work with each other and surprise, surprise, we would. So
that's a really engaging and gutsy thing to say, isn't it? I'm good and I'm funny. Employ me. Give you a job. It's, you know, write that down, folks. What was the production that you were kind of working on at that time?
Well, I'd been brought back to reinvent Circus Oz, essentially. So there wasn't a production, there wasn't a show, it was like carte blanche, make a new company, make a new show, make it marvelous, all in 6 weeks. It was pretty fraught, but and then the building fell down in the rain as well.
Wow, that's
on tour. Yeah, it was skin about teeth times, but it was skin about teeth times for Circus Oz, and well, it always is skin about teeth times for Circus Oz, I think. But at that time, it was particularly hairy. But we did survive it, and we went on to do a show that was half gladiatorial. They did an acrobatic piece that was based on a kind of comic take on gladiators, and they did another piece which was based on Sam Poo the bushranger, who was the only Chinese bushranger in Australian history. And so we made a show together based on those 2 ideas. Not at the same time, at different times.
You've always been physical theatre practitioners then, yes?
Yes. I don't know. I feel like I would kind of go, the collective of my work has in common that it's physical theatre, but I feel like, you know, I've kind of worked in dance, in circus, in physical theatre, and I'm always a bit unsure about, you know, words like physical theatre. And is physical theatre a genre, or is it a descriptor of a kind of circus or a kind of dance? You know, and
the genre, I would say, that feeds into clowning. I read somewhere, Deborah, you tell me if this is true or not, because you should never believe all you read, of course.
No,
but you were told about you were about 17 that you were too old to be a gymnast, but then you went on to be an amazing physical artist. Is that right, that you were told not to be a gymnast?
Yes. I mean, it was one of those things at the time in gymnastics, and it has changed now, but I was working, you know, at a sort of an elite level in gymnastics. And it was at the time where the sort of Olga Corbett's and then the Nadia Comaneci's, and of course, Australia was trying to copy what was happening internationally. So it was always looking at younger people for potential. So once you got to 17, you know, you either had to be the very best or you didn't get a look in, because they would take someone who might be even, you might be beating in competition, but they were 5 years younger, therefore they had potential. So there was, and that attitude has changed in gymnastics now. But at the time, it was very much sort of said, well, you know, 17, that's kind of when you retire.
Wow.
From gymnastics, from competitive
not
gymnastics.
From circus, and you haven't. You're still. I mean, I'm fascinated about this Elders festival. Had you been working prior to that, or was this like, oh, let's do this? Or what were these seeds and the roots of this seniors festival and your piece of work there?
We started.
You know, go on, Sue.
Batton and Broadway started working together in 2013 or 2014, something like that, and we started doing a little piece for circus, for burlesque. What do they call the burlesque? Cabaret beige, or whatever they're called. And we started doing clowning together and realised that there was something about the duet that was funny. And so we just went on from there. And the first show of the classics was presented in 2014. So we put together a lineup of fantastic elder performers, which was a mix of professional performers and community performers, to do a Spiegel tent season at Circus Oz. And that was very successful. People loved it. They said it was fantastic, and so we just kept going from there, really, until
unpack a little bit of what were your starting points for this? Were you asking for stories or from the people around you? Were they your own stories? And that word of empowerment, did that give empowerment to yourselves or your audience? Can you a little bit unpack about some beginnings and the raison d'etre for the work?
Yeah, because I would go back a little bit further and say we were at a festival, a circus festival in Mullumbimby.
That's right.
And this is a national circus festival that happens in Australia, usually every 2 years. It was meant to be this year, but now it's been postponed. It'll probably be next year. And, you know, at this festival, there's often sort of impromptu cabaret nights where people who might be working on something in classes during the day put together an act. And there was just this, it was the first time we decided to do an over 50s cabaret, because I was looking around the lot at who was there and was like, there is enough people to do an over 50s cabaret. And let's start this thing, you know. And Sue performed in that solo, and I hosted it, actually. What was
Sue's performance in that then? What did she do?
She did Queen of the Cups, I think.
Ah, the Queen of the Cups.
Tanya. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a hoot of a night. It was ridiculous. We all turned up on the back of a ute. It was an outdoor stage. We got somebody to drive in on a ute. Two of the women from Spaghetti Circus, Leonie and Sue, arrived with 2 chickens and a dog. You know, so the ute kind of pulled up to a screeching halt. We were all screaming and yelling. We jumped over a fence. The dogs were running around. The chickens were running around. We had a band. I was trying to start the show and the dogs were pissing on the place. And
what's a ute? Ute?
Oh, a utility car, you know, a car with a tray on the back.
A tray?
Yeah.
Like
what a tradesperson might use.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pickup
so
truck.
Yeah, pickup truck. Yeah. So we were all on the back of the ute. It's called a ute in Australia.
I know.
And look,
ute is short for. I think you need to be clear about this, Deb. Ute is short for utility vehicle.
Okay.
And
yeah,
it's like it's a little pickup truck. It's like a ordinary sized estate car with the top cut off the back. So the back was filled with just completely filled with people, with women, or mostly women. Well, all women.
Mostly women, actually.
Going
yeah.
completely crazy.
Was it really a women's show then? Was it a real mixed gang?
I think that one was nearly all women. The band had some men and women in it, but the cast, I can't remember if there was a single man, actually. So it wasn't intended that the main criteria was over 50s. And so we were going around the festival and inviting anyone that was over 50, do you want to perform? Have you got something you can perform? Will you perform? You know, so it was a series of single acts with a host, if you like. And look, it was an absolute hoot. And young people were just having the best time because some of them were seeing their teachers perform.
Wow.
And they hadn't seen that before because there hadn't been a context for some of those older people to perform. But just by giving it a context of saying over 50s, people felt willing to step into that. And some people were doing old material that they'd done before, and some people experimented with something new. So that was kind of the very, very beginning. And then Sue and I were doing some acts together. Sue approached me, I think, about doing something for this Moulin Beige cabaret night. And when I was in Circus Oz, Sue had taught me how to do hats.
Hats?
Juggling.
Juggling hats, yeah.
Juggling hats. And hat tricks, you know. And so we decided to do something together with hats, and so we created Batton and Broadway initially just to do 1 or 2 acts. And then there was just this kind of growing sense that, you know what, older women need to be seen still being active and still participating in performance, you know, that, and there's not enough representation. And so that was sort of enough for us to sort of just keep going and let's make the next thing, let's make the next thing. And that started with a series of different acts. Then we decided we'd do the classics, which would be the over 50s in Melbourne, rather than in the sort of safety of a circus festival. It was a public performance of over 50s circus performers in Melbourne.
And what sort of audiences did you get then, Debra and Sue? The big audiences? How did they respond to it? What was the feedback on that?
So,
well, people loved the show. People really loved the show because it was entertaining and it was really, I hate to use the word again, but joyful. It was a really pleasant experience for everyone who was there. And what surprised us was the diversity of ranges, diversity of age range that we got. Like we got children right through to grandparents and everybody in between. And that was fantastic that, you know, young people really enjoyed seeing older people having a really good crack at it, which was great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it was amazing.
So this collaboration, where's it going to go? Where's it going? I mean, this idea of collaboration, because you know, we all, even if you're doing a solo show, as you well know, we're collaborating, aren't we? There's always a team of people in there. What makes a good collaboration? You know, we talk. You know, it's like for that kind of disagreements. Perhaps talk about, because clown collaboration is a real, you know, you need to really listen, don't you? That very close partnership of who's doing what when and listening and picking up. So how did it work for you, that collaborative kind of work, both on and off the stage?
Yes, we've worked very much on the traditional, well, yeah, it is traditional, of the classic double act and in which I play the straight person really, and Deb plays the funny person really, although we both swap a little bit. It's kind of, it's in that realm that I'm the serious and adult and Deb's the stupid, annoying child. And that kind of tension between the two of us, I think, feeds the relationship and also feeds the performance. And we do that all the way through, like whether we're comparing together or doing the show, like we do a 1 hour show together now, which is the one and the other, which is just the two of us on, well, the musician and the two of us on stage together. And in the classics, we compare and then different people come on and do their numbers. But essentially, the two of us, we're both competing, as you say, we're both competing, but in the nicest possible way.
But this is lovely. You know, I mean, in the UK, we've got French and Saunders. I don't know about the Australian scene, but anybody particularly inspired you? I mean, we do have to have that tension, don't you, that between the two, that's what makes it work. But anybody kind of in your life or in your performance world inspired you at all with it to make this, to get this collaboration going and for it to work?
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I was inspired by French and Saunders as well when I first saw them. But mostly in Australia, it's mostly men. Los Trios Rimbarcas is an example. They call it a trio, but there's two of them. Frank and Woodley. Well, Woodley and
there's a trio.
Frank Woodley and.
Did you say a trio of two?
Yeah, they're called trio, but there's actually two of them. And they were very funny, and I watched them night after night after night because they were playing the same festival circuit. So you got to see a lot of their kind of dynamic, which was exactly that. Neil plays straight, and his offside plays comedy. Yeah, so they're funny. But really, you know, the double act is a classic in clowning, and Laurel and Hardy are a really good example of the straight man and the funny man, and that cliche it provides you with so much food for getting on with it.
Yeah.
Are you both the writers? Do you both bring because I think Lauren Hardy, is it Stan Oliver? No, Stan was the writer really.
Yeah.
Are you both writers? Do you collaborate on the writing? Do you kind of chuck each other ideas at others, or what's your process then on that collaboration?
Yeah.
Can you perhaps give any advice to people that really want to go to?
Look, I think you know, it was really interesting when we were first working together and we were starting to make things, and there was a certain point where I think we articulated this difference between ourselves, which was Sue had this beautiful kind of history through vaudeville and this construct that she articulated to me once, which I found gobsmacking, and it's really ridiculous that I found it gobsmacking, but I did. And it was, you know, you say what you're going to do, you do it, and then you tell the audience what you just did. And I was like, oh my God, is that the formula?
For those that weren't listening, could you say that again, please?
You tell the audience what you're going to do, you do it, and you tell the audience that you just did it.
Deja vu, isn't it?
Isn't it great? And I was I was going to say, I found that interesting because I felt like I actually came from a place more where never let the audience get ahead of me. That was sort of my modus operandi. Was
how does that play out then? We'll go back to that that three-part structure that Sue said. But how did that play out then? Never let the audience get ahead of you. How does that work for you
what I realised was that Sue kept doing this structure before we talked about it, and I kept subverting the structure because I was coming from a place of don't let the audience get ahead.
Because you want surprise.
So there was this really funny thing where I'm constantly trying to pull the rug out of this formula without being conscious that that's what I'm doing. And then eventually when Sue kind of articulated that, it was like, oh, this is amazing. I get it and it works and we should keep doing this. You know, you don't change what you're doing. You know, keep this structure, and that allows me, just with me trying to work from my kind of natural place of not wanting the audience to get ahead, it's almost like the how we did things came together and created the
That's
material.
really interesting, Deborah, because it's like two sort of different processes working, aren't they? Where did your process come from, Deborah? And where did you said mention vaudeville soup, but where did yours come from, Deborah? What training kind of process?
Mine was very organic because I went from gymnastics to dance to theatre to circus to physical theatre. And it was sort of like I just kept learning things on the way. Like when I was doing, I think my first introduction to the performing arts was through contemporary dance. I had never experienced performing arts before that. We didn't go to see shows. We didn't, you know, my family was a sporty family. Like sport was everything, and I did gymnastics and I just didn't know anything about theatre. So dance was the vehicle that got me to start knowing that I could use my body in a way that was expressive rather than competitive. And from there, it was just this sort of following my nose. I'm kind of doing dance, but I'm not a really highly technical dancer. So, of course, you have to be a little bit strange to find your way. Like I would never have become the great technician in dance. So I guess I found another way to be in dance, and that other way led me to kind of more theatrical sort of work. But I wasn't really an actor. That didn't sort of feel right, and I didn't have that training. But then, you know, found myself sort of playing in comedy, and I did some mask work, and then that. So it's just been this kind of gradual picking up of different things until I developed my own process.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's really interesting because you know you go to training and you think by going to these classes we'll hopefully end up with the finished product. But I think that journey that you're talking about is organic, isn't it? And knowing and that line you said right at the beginning, or Sue said that I'm funny, give us a job. that always feeding into your work, or certainly into your dance work as time went by?
Yeah, well, it's almost like funny because you're not good enough at the other thing.
Can I just butt in for a second? It was fascinating for me to hear both Nola Ray and Iris Eidenstein talk about technicality, that they could actually teach the technique of clowning to people who didn't necessarily have any technique. That there's actually a structure that you can learn, or pieces that you can learn, or things that you can learn. And I think, I will disagree with about this forever, but I think that the fact that we disagree about it is part of the tension of what makes the double act work. I'm a technician. I learn how to do a trick, and then I learn how to begin a trick and end a trick, and so on and so forth. And that's a really different way of thinking about the process from what Debra does, and yet the two characters work together really well.
That's fantastic. That's a really good point, actually, Sue. The technical side's there, but the one that's not quite so au fait, that also works because of the potential for failure and getting things beautifully wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, well, I insist on juggling only with breakable objects. So I use real crockery and real glassware and and sometimes it does go wrong. Sometimes things get broken on stage, but that's food for Deb. It's not discombobulating to either of us, really. It's a confusion that we both relish because it's a moment of crisis, which is great.
Oh, this is great, Sue. This is great, Debra. I'm just going to pause for one moment. Let's have a little think maybe about going back to something you said about there's a lot of acts out there, perhaps in Australia, which are kind of male-oriented. But are there more women? Is your collaboration, have you inspired others? But why a little think about that? I just want a little shout out again to all our listeners out there listening today, and also our future listeners. We need your donations. We're very thankful for your donations, but we need donations, we need patronage. Go onto the zoological.ie site and subscribe to the series. This is series 3 now. And the people who have already subscribing and donating, thank you very, very much. So the subscription is through Patreon. Go onto the Patreon site and just give some money, please, because these things need support, and your support to keep them going. This is a unique opportunity for these talks to keep going. So thank you, one and all. So back to our discussion. How is the clown movement? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Share. Sounds like the name of a song. Share all the posts. Thank you. So I think that when we first met a few weeks ago, such a pleasure to meet. We talked about this idea in Australia. They sort of a little bit on the sort of cultural side of why were so many clowns female clowns? What's happening in Australia? Are you at the forefront of a big movement out there, Debra and Sue?
Yes. Yes.
Tell me more. Tell us more.
Well, dating back to the very beginnings in Circus Oz, there were always funny women in that outfit, and that was part of our process and part of our commitment, that we would be important because we were funny and because we could deal with feminist ideas through the context of clowning. And that was important to us then, and it's important to a whole lot of women now. So that continues, I think. And yeah, we started it.
Yeah. Good. Oh, this is great.
I think Sue definitely has credit for starting it. I jumped on the bandwagon along the way.
Not the uke. You jump on the uke.
I jumped on the ute. I jumped on the ute, and that was great. But certainly, the founders of Circus Oz were very much the women who kind of really said to the Australian population, women can do anything and they can be funny, and that was a really important kind of thing that happened. And there's certainly been, ever since then, funny women in Circus Oz. Like Nikki Wilkes has been a wonderful clown in Circus Oz, and also working independently. She worked with Claire Bartholomew together for a long time. And Nikki and Claire have also been, I think, a women duo that have influenced a lot of people about the possibility of what women clowns can be. They were Pierre and I can't remember the other one. But anyway, they're hilarious clowns, and very physical. And now there's also, like, I feel like the clown has also really gone into the queer kind of performance world in Australia, particularly in Melbourne, you know, like Kimberly and her partner.
Kimberly
Tanner.
Twiner. Kimberly
Yeah.
Twiner. Yeah.
Like,
And Poco Moco.
yes,
Poco Moco.
Poco Moco, and some of them have come through the John Butler School of Physical Theatre in Melbourne. And now we've also got a lot of young clowns that are coming out of NICA. Now they're mostly coming out as soloists, but that's partly pragmatic, you know, that they're trying to earn a living, and it's harder for a duo to earn a living than a solo performance. So I think it's, you know, there's definitely a lot of different people experimenting with clown in all sorts of different ways.
Wow. Can I pick up on that harder to make a living? Is it, I mean, you just mentioned that it's harder to make a living as a collaboration rather than a solo, maybe because, you know, there's a greater amount of finance involved. Well, it's just maybe a discussion about how is this impacting on clown work, and is the clown coming, we talked about this earlier, coming out of the circus more and going into these seniors festivals and going into different kind of performance venues, and what is it like maybe for women to I think Ira on Wednesday talked about the dangers of women maybe being on the street doing this kind of work. How has it been for you?
I just want to talk about that a little bit, Maggie, because I think it's really important. And I know that we're not supposed to talk about COVID-19 on this program. We're supposed to pretend that it didn't happen, but it is happening. And clowning's always been an art form for me, at any rate, that could happen anywhere and happen outdoors, or happen in the street, or happen in promenade, or happen one-to-one with one person in the audience and one person performing. And that's a strength of the art form, I think. And that will lead to lots more interesting work that we're not seeing yet, but we will see as we creep out from lockdown and become more in the world more present in the world. But also, I was listening to a teacher today who was saying, you know, it's one thing to translate things that you already know from being face to face with someone to being a live performance. So as a teacher, she feels quite confident. But as a therapist, which is a secondary stream to her bow, she doesn't feel so confident because it's a harder thing for her to do because she hasn't done it. She can Zoom, but she hasn't done it in person on a one-to-one basis with someone. And I think it's a little bit the same with performing, that you need to have an experience of being direct with a member of the audience in order to translate that to a filmic or a video or a streaming.
That's a really interesting point, Sue. I've been teaching online, and when I started this teaching online, because I had to, trying to negotiate how you communicate with a room full of not strangers but people that don't know each other, and how you then create the dynamics that you actually get everybody in the room to feel that they're part of an audience. They're in a class, but they're also like an audience as well. So they're getting the group dynamic. For me, it's a new genre. It's a new way of doing things. And I think if people are nervous or thinking they're not doing it great at the moment, it's because they're having to learn even where the camera's eye is, you know? So many people are talking like this, or or this, and you're going like, I'm over here, you know. So it's interesting, isn't it, that we've been forced to become, you know, sort of almost filmmakers to a certain degree, and how to negotiate. But that's just for now, or maybe it's not just for now. Maybe we will communicate more. Maybe we will do a collaborative Australia UK performance as a trio, a proper trio. Who knows? But what I'm saying is, it's interesting, isn't it, that I think that, you know, maybe the clown rises up, the disaster, bang, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I think that way of thinking is, it's not just clowns that do that, but I think that way of creative, let's find an answer to this problem, might not be the right answer, but I think there is that kind of innovative way of responding. What do you think?
I would agree. I think it's also like one of the things that you gather along the way with clowning is the vulnerability of failure, which, you know, I suppose for some that could mean I'm not going to take those risks because I might fail. But with the vulnerability of failure becomes a new possibility with the clown. And so that desire to sort of go, never done it before, doesn't mean I'm not going to learn how, doesn't mean I'm not going to give it a crack, because even if I fail, I will find something in it that can be useful and playful, and in failure there is often many funny possibilities.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the great gifts of working as clown and with clowning, that you do learn. And I suppose most people who have become good at anything kind of say the same thing. They become good at something because they've been prepared to fail.
Yeah.
And get up and go again.
I have to say, Debra, it's fantastic to hear you admitting that you're a clown, finally. Because all the time she was working in Circus Oz and she was an acrobat, she was an ex-gymnast who was doing Russian bar and teeterboard and Russian wheel, and yet saying all the time she wasn't working in circus. Oh, I don't do circus, I do contemporary dance. So it's fantastic to hear you say, to embrace the word clowning as a positive. And I suppose this is one area that we disagree in, Maggie. It's about the definition and the use of the word. I think we should claim the word circus and be proud of the fact that we do circus, and be proud of the fact that we do clowning, and bring the audience around to using those words the same, as you know, because dance can mean any form of dance, from mama dancing to contemporary dance, to, you know, folk dancing, to anything. And I think circus and clowning can be the same. It embraces a huge diversity.
I don't disagree with you. I just feel that the clown has come out of the circus. I think the clown it can be everywhere. So that's how I feel. We you know, the clown went into the circus. The clown's in the theatre. The clown's at parties. The clown's in art galleries. The clown's in teachers in classrooms. The clown's on the street. It's just, I'm thinking, and that's why I always say the word clowning.
Yes, but don't you think, Maggie, that the clown didn't come out of the circus, it went into the circus?
The clown went into the circus, absolutely.
Yes, and because it came from everywhere.
Absolutely, the clown was the clown, the clod was the bumbling man from agricultural background, and then you had the court jester who had the king's ear, and then you had the wise fool, you know. So there's all these different types. And very much usually or traditionally associated with men, but then you have all these kind of women kind of doing it as well, perhaps in the company of women, and there's lots of research that's what women have been doing, and clowning around together, especially a couple of glasses of wine. Woo! But seriously, I think that we've just covered, we've traditionally perhaps told that, you know, be sensible, and in some cultures not to clown, not to be silly, not to be loud, not to be raucous. And I think that's, and I would say maybe, I don't know, I haven't done the research, but perhaps in some cultures that might still be the case, maybe, but certainly in our, you know,
You've just gone mute. You've muted yourself. Maggie.
Sorry. But talking about it and getting and showing it and doing it and making it into something, and that lovely word joyous, and bringing people together. And I remember a young woman saying to me, why do you want to be a clown? I think I was about 40 at the time. And she was just a 19, I want to be a clown. And I thought, that fear, why would you want to look
Make
silly? It is, but talking to Ira about a little bit about culture, and I think this is also a cultural thing, possibly for women
definitely.
to
And look, I would have to say, Maggie, that, you know, one of the first sessions of these webinars, when you talked about clowning in different things, I had a really strong response to that. And I think it's the thing about, I don't feel like I have a clown, and I feel like that's what people think clown is, that you have a clown and you know your clown, and you know, and all the parameters of it. And I don't have that. And that's where I feel often uncertain about claiming the space. I'm very comfortable that I do clowning when I'm on stage.
But Deborah, you're absolutely right. I think some of the pedagogies of clowning have said, have you found your clown? I don't think that's helpful at all.
No.
I critique this in my PhD. I don't think it's helpful. I think, you know, you're clowning. Maybe you create a character, like Charlie Chaplin had a character. And that's how he clowned. He had that clown, and that's how, you know, maybe the Laurel and Hardys. That's their way of that's how they expressed their way of clowning. So I think if you choose to have a specific character that you create, that's fine, and we can use the mask to express your stories through the genre of clowning. So I think I'm with you on that. I think no wonder people get a bit confused, going, I haven't found my clown, you know.
Yes.
You know, that you're vulnerable, you're open. There's a beautiful moment of clowning when, not gone quite right, or we make me cry or feeling whatever it is. I think that's fine. You're a clown, Deborah. Sorry.
Look, I'm very happy with it.
Join the club.
Can I just interrupt for a second? We've got a question here from Susie Maxwell Stewart about teaching.
Oh,
yes.
What do you think?
You've muted yourself again.
You muted yourself again.
It's a clown moment.
It's a clown.
You're talking to a clown. I'm sorry, but here we are.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important thing to teach a person? Oh, big question. Sue, you pick off.
Yeah, I can answer that. Well, I can't, but I can start. I think really it depends upon the person, because every person is going to need a different thing that they need to take away from a particular workshop that you might be teaching. So if it's a person who has no technique at all, then the first thing they have to learn is how to stand still. If it's a person who has never clowned before, then the first thing they have to learn is how to make an entrance. If it's a person who's really experienced, then it might be about their personality in their particular clowning moment, how they express their person and their selfhood in that thing. So I think it's the answer is, I'm sorry, Susie, but it depends entirely on the response of the teacher to the moment.
Okay.
Debra?
I have one little, my thing would be to say, authenticity is a more useful ambition than originality.
Ooh.
Define authenticity.
Yes, would you like to
about that word.
that a little
Very
bit
nervous.
Well,
Everything's.
I can't. No, I can't. I can do it. I can do a bit of a job of it. You know, I mean, I understand authenticity is a very complex subject, and you can do a PhD on what is authenticity. But for me, authenticity is an ever-changing thing. You wake up each day a newly authentic person. You know, it's not this, but there is something about always trying to be, always sort of striving for your authenticity at that time that you're making work, and really the statement is that that's a more useful ambition than originality. So the ambition to find your sort of most authentic self when you're making material, your most authentic expression of that material, is the most useful ambition. And that means constantly questioning your authenticity. You never find it. You never find it. You're always questioning it and seeking it. Or you might find it momentarily and then you lose it. And then, you know, it's this, yeah. So I guess you need to take the statement as a whole, that it's a more useful ambition than originality. And I think a lot of people put too much energy into trying to be original.
I'm muted. Yeah, I mean, is it what's original? Everything is being repackaged, redone. What do you think?
Look, exactly. And originality, you know, if you want to look for originality, then you have to do, you might think you're doing something original because you've just forgotten the influence that's helped you to do it. You know, I feel like I've made work that I feel like, wow, this is really unique to me. And then sometime later, I've realized that actually that was influenced by something that I'd forgotten I'd experienced or that I'd seen. You know, because these experiences can go into your unconscious. You're not always aware of what you're drawing inspiration from.
But they will be unique to you because they'll be your lived experiences in your body, in your culture, in your time. So there is a uniqueness of that. It's just that your experiences might well be shared by many, many, many other people.
Yeah.
So,
Maggie, I've never gone for originality. That's
no.
completely nothing to do with any of my thinking. My thinking has always been about drawing on a whole lot of different influences to make something marvellous. The challenge of working with Deb, and what has been really marvellous for me with working with her, has been that she has kept me to my authenticity. So it's about walking a tightrope between those two extremes of experience for me.
So can I ask you, I mean, you might not be able to answer this, but I find this idea of doing performance for the over 50s really exciting. And we're all apart, aren't we? What would you like to think what might happen next?
Well, I think clowning is traditionally, it's something that you do when you're older. In traditional circus, there's a long tradition of people becoming clowns in their 60s, in their 50s, in their 60s, even in their 70s. They, you know, old acrobats become clowns. That's a really traditional way of thinking about it, which we've lost contact with that a little bit, I think. But as, you know, my own physical capacity to do the web act or an aerial piece or whatever has become less, my clowning capacity has become stronger. So I think what we're seeing now is a flourishing of that kind of energy in older people, which is great.
I think that's really good, actually, because, you know, that idea that people over a certain age, you think, oh, we're morphing into or edging towards being the funny people or the wise fools or the wise, I don't know. But I find that really exciting, actually, Sue. How about you, Debra?
Yeah, look, I completely agree with Sue that, you know, the tradition of the clown being the person who's actually got the most performance experience in the troupe. So they might have been that star acrobat and the star aerialist and, you know, in group acts, and they've gradually made their way to clown as part of the tradition in circus. Certainly to me sort of opens up that possibility in contemporary circus that it's available to us. And not that you have to be old, but that the possibility of clowning now until I'm 80 feels very real to me. It doesn't, I have no sense of, oh, I'm on my last legs. Not at all. I'm learning new things about what I can say in this way. And yeah, I really don't expect that it's going to end. You know, it's I'm excited by what might we do next. And recently Sue and I have been sort of talking about, well, if we're going to do another classics, we need some new material, because we've put out some stuff now for a few years, and what's it going to be? Well, we don't know yet, you know, but yes, that's exciting.
Magic.
Oh, who's going into magic?
I've explored magic a little bit, because it's such a it's not so hard on the body, and it's very hard on the mind, though. You have to remember a routine from beginning to end, and which way you turn the newspaper, and it's very, very, very challenging. But it's very exciting as well.
In a way, Sue, that's really good. The clown that couldn't do magic. It's got so much potential, you know. A balloon, you know, because you've almost got to know. You've got to know it before you can get it wrong, don't you? That's it.
Yeah.
You've got to be an expert in it before you can get it wrong. I love that, actually. Learning to say new things in this way, Debra. And that you're going to carry on till you're 80. I hope you both carry on to 80 and beyond.
I hope so.
You're hugely inspirational. This level of collaboration, this leading the way on women, older women, performing, collaborating, risking it, and also encouraging other people behind you. I think that's long may you continue. Long may, you know, 80, 90, 180.
Well, my mother's turning 90 in January, and she's still going strong, so I'm not going to give up soon.
Isn't that lovely? She's born in the same school year as my mum. My mum turned 90 in November. I'm going to have to wind us up in a moment, folks, and another big shout out to all the people who have contributed towards making today happen. Please send in some donations, subscribe to the series. When you see this talk out on Facebook out there, please share it. Tell people about this. This is a huge movement. It's really important that people listen to us and hear us. This is a hugely inspirational talk today. I'm so thrilled to have hosted and listened to Debra Batton and Sue Broadway all the way from Australia. Any last words, Sue and Debra?
Look, I think for me, the last word has to be around sort of, we are part of the sort of 60s and 70s feminist movement. And of course, we are going to continue that into our older years. You know, there isn't a sense of that ideology stops. It's part of also what drives us forward is actually the influence of feminism and the fact that it's still a very, very necessary movement that's still got a lot more work to do.
Yeah, I agree. Sue?
Yes, yes, I agree what she said.
It's stay with us, folks. Anybody else out there got any questions to ask to these huge clowns, or huge performers, dance choreographers, entertainers extraordinaire from Australia? Please put it in the Q&A. If you ask it, they might think, oh, I wish I'd asked that question. So whack it in the Q&A, folks. I think I'm just looking back over my notes. I've copious notes that I've made here. And I love that opening. I'm funny, give us a job. Sometimes in life you have to be feisty and bold, don't you? And just you know, ask for it. So I'm so glad you asked Sue for a job there, Debra. Worked out well, didn't it?
It really did. It really did. And it was one of those things where I think because I was employed at the time, it potentially made it easier to have that self-belief. You know, it's I think that's one of the things that does happen, that when you're not working, you quickly lose that sort of confidence, I think. So I was employed at the time with an ensemble in a youth theatre company, and and I think that fed that confidence at that time.
And that lovely phrase, we had a hoot of a night. May every night you have be a hoot, whatever you're doing. But isn't it lovely when you finish that work and that was a hoot?
Yeah,
that was fantastic. It's like, it's the best thing in the world, isn't it?
It's so good, that feeling where just
a hoot of the night.
A hoot of the night.
Yeah. So collaboration, I think maybe you've got to have an opposites attract sometimes.
Yeah, I think, or I think sort of being willing to tease out the differences and exploit them.
That's good.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried being each other?
Ooh.
Stepped in the shoes of each other's shoes, switch shoes?
No.
I'm
not.
No.
Send each other your pair of shoes and say, try me for a day, baby.
She wouldn't fit them.
No way. No way.
That sounds like a challenge.
It's funny though, Maggie, because I think what I've become aware of is how much more I'm driven into a particular mode of being in order to be in opposition to Debra's mode of being. You know, I'm a terribly elegant and middle-aged and kind of well-dressed woman, which is nothing like, you know, I'm a complete dag actually. But when I'm working with Debra, I have to be, you know, I have to wear the high heels and the stockings and the earrings and have the, you know, the makeup perfect, and you know, and that's very interesting for me to take on a different persona because Debra's in the room. If you get my drift.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I guess it's that willingness, isn't it? Really, in the end, there's a willingness to kind of go, this is working, this way that we're working in opposition for each other, and then to exaggerate and amplify that, rather than to keep sort of trying to go, oh, now it's your turn to be this role and it's my turn to be that role. You know, it's sort of allowing ourselves to really tease out these ways that we are with each other and exaggerate them and let them flourish, and then to celebrate that along the way. And I think, you know, it's important. I think what's important, like I feel that Sue expresses her gratitude to me and I express my gratitude to her. And I think that has been something that has kept us working together, that we're willing to do that with each other because it's genuine. We really do feel that way toward each other.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, your next project, I look forward to hearing about it.
Well, there's a question, Maggie. I just want to ask, there's a question from Susie. Is there any difference in comedy in Australia than in the UK? And I just want to, it ties in with your question about where we're going next, because I think we don't know where we're going next because the world's changing and the world's different place and etc. But what am I trying to say? There's no difference in the world anywhere about comedy. Comedy's essentially the same, whether you're a Papua New Guinean or an African or a South American or an American, or, you know, there's a strand of humanity that runs the same in all of us, and that's one of the strengths of the clown, that it can communicate across borders and in all kinds of different places. That said, you know, Australia's not in lockdown and UK is at the moment, so we don't know where it's going.